And welcome to either a drive dust off or a how the heck do we do a drive, AMA. So ask me anything kind of quick gathering here to get us ready for the spring drive. I've got a little bit of like an agenda here, but I mostly do want to just be like, hey, what questions do you have for me? Let's get specific about it. Let's get brainstormy about ways to bring some energy to your shows or whatever it is that, has piqued your curiosity to be like, I don't really know. I should probably know more about drives. So I think I'm just going to kick off with like talking about the drive in general for a little bit to make sure you guys feel confident about what the heck we're doing, also why we're doing it. I'm going to talk a little bit about pitching itself, like the mechanics of a good pitch. And then I'm going to open up basically to questions, basically. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually share my screen for y'all and show you guys firsthand our drive site. So you've probably seen this if you've clicked through any of the links that I've sent out a couple times regarding the drive. This is all tricked out on our website now as well. If you hit any donate link, this is what's feeding that donate link now for us. So, on our website or any of the stuff coming out as a public push on social media or emails, this is all where people are going to be landing. So they either donate directly, I'll show you here on the website, which is essentially you can either hit this donate button and it brings up this immediate donate, kind of like pick your level kind of thing here, shows you the nice progress bar at the top, or you click through to see more about about the drive and how it's going, and it brings you to this bigger page, which is what we use as a station to see the donor comments on the right here, which is like, how convenient. We've had some pre-drive donors that I can actually show you what this actually looks like in real time. And this is over on the right side. It'll just be a continuous feed, and it'll get heavy, y'all. Like we have somewhere between 100 and 150 people that end up donating to the drive over the course of 2 weeks. And we introduced this particular type of a drive site last fall, and donors loved it. I mean, we had a lot of people taking advantage of being able to be public. So in other words, being able to see their names and then also leaving comments, which I think, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but being able to get real-time comments from people just like was such a boost when you were live, doing a drive show, because you were able to say, hey, thanks very much, Will, for that donation and for, praising the show. Because you can see it come in literally during your show. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
go ahead.
even if you just say, you should probably just say the person's first name, just, unless you cleared it with them. But no, I think people like to hear their names spoken on the video. Yeah.
And just so you all know, to get here, people have to like basically indicate that they want to be public, right? So there isn't when you go through to make the donation, you can pick anonymous. So, and you'll see that a few times. It'd be like, hey, and we kind of awkwardly be like, hey, thanks to the anonymous donor who gave $1 million. Like, that's really great of you. But for the most part, yeah, what's Dave saying is that, thank people with a first name. And because we're doing just first names, you can also say dollar amounts because that's not
Right.
technically somebody could come to this website. It's a public website. You could see exactly that, Dave Tucker gave $1 million to the radio station. Fine. But on the air, by kind of anonymizing them a little bit by just using first names, you're not just thanking people and thanking them for the comments, but you're also putting a figure out there. And that's like the number one thing about the FunDrive is that people are like, oh yeah, I love the station, but they kind of like, it's a little bit of a team sport is the best way I could describe it. So when you hear people repeatedly giving $50, $30, $75, that's less about you than having to name a price of like, hey, go to the website today and donate $1 million. You can, that it kind of is already kind of in the ethos of people thinking, oh, if everybody else is giving like $50, $100 or something, like maybe I'll give somewhere around that range too. So there's like kind of a little psychology that goes into this too in thanking people. But 95% of this is generally about being able to thank people in live time, and you can see it come through. And then again, in being able to kind of pick whatever comments you want to like, maybe respond to or even read out loud. You do not have to read the scroll every single show. Like a lot of people will kind of go back and, say, okay, so like, for example, on Tuesdays, I'm the first and only live programmer all day, like midday, right? So I'll come in and I'll read people back to, Emma and maybe even Tom's show on Sunday night, right? And I'll go kind of backward and be like, all right, so since last night, thanks to everybody who gave this morning. And I kind of I encourage people to think about chunks of the day and in your relationship to other people, because especially on weekends, we're all live wall to wall and people will be heavy thanking people. And that's fine. Like there's no such thing as too much thanks, but it can be a little bit boring to start listening to if people are just leaning too heavy on the thank yous. But to be honest, Savannah, you're a great example. Like you should go heavy on thanking anybody who gave for the last 24 hours when your show comes on, because it's basically going to be me and one of the still lifers, and we're the only live people basically before you. And Tom, you're the other example, right? You're at the end, you're anchoring the end of a Sunday, and we will have come off an entire weekend of people probably somewhat using this a little bit as a crutch. Again, not a great, huge deal, but just like keep that in mind as you're kind of back selling thank yous. The other thing about this website, and by the way, y'all stop me or pause me if a question pops up while I'm doing stuff here. But this site also kind of acts as like the anchor where you can come and find what the donor perks are. So like the list of like I know we're giving away tickets to donors, but what shows are they? They're right here, as well as a Burn and Puppet banner, which we always get. They kind of just, we don't get specific about which one because A, they're constantly selling out of them, and B, they're constantly making new ones. So we just kind of generally say Bread and Puppet banner just so folks know. And then the goals, right? So those like handful of goals that are not the total goal of 15,000, but those specific types of donor goals. And let me explain this for a second here. The reason why we do what I call sub goals is because people want to hear themselves be a hero. You know, they want to kind of be part of that larger effort to getting towards a goal. Now, that's one thing if it's like your show, Tom, on March 31st, right? And we're like, it's the last live show of the drive, and man, we're at $14,995, and like someone's going to be that hero that comes through. There's that kind of a hero, and that will happen. But these other sub goals are people who hear themselves or get motivated by being like, you know what? I will become a sustainer of this drive. They're looking for 5. I'm going to be one of those 5. Or I've never given a GDR before, but I listen all the time. I'm going to be one of these new people. So again, a little bit of fundraising psychology here, but people really do respond to these goals, and then they get hyped, right? And Dave's actually been sitting in the chair when we've hit, 25 new donors or whatever it is. And again, you can live respond to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've enjoyed being correct the last 2 or 3 drives that we were underestimating our abilities, and we kicked ass. We really did.
Yeah, it's been, and the number one reason why we have exceeded our goal drives the last 2 drives, frankly, is because of more local and live programming.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's not rocket science, like people are hearing great radio made by real live humans in the studio, and they appreciate it, and they're going to give.
Lou, I have a question about that. So on the website, does it tell you how many new donors we've had? Is that where that gets tracked too?
No, great question, Savannah. So this is where AI lets us down. I have to manually be cross-checking across our database who's coming in new, who's going to be, and I look on the back end of this donate site and it'll tell me who's a sustainer, right? Who's setting a recurring donation kind of thing. So what I do is I tally that, and then once or twice a day, sometimes a little bit more, depending on like how, like weekends are busy times, right? Like again, more people are listening on weekends. We have more live programmers, but at least once a day, sometimes a few times a day, I'm calling the studio actually, and I'm talking to the live programmer, and I'm having you update in the studios. You'll see there's a whiteboard in there. I put it in there on Saturday, and you're going to like literally whiteboard, marker in the new numbers. And I'll be like, all right, so it's 4 sustainers and we're at 19 new donors. You basically update those. So they're a little fudgy, usually during the drive. They're pretty close though. And then I'm also live updating that on the actual front website. So on WGDR.org is where I'll like put a little text box eventually up here that has kind of the live updating of that. People get, less bananas about that, and they're more into like, what's the total? And that is always going to be true right here in this like progress bar. And that progress bar also lives on the FunDrive site too. Which is right here underneath the cassette tape. So that you can always trust. And the other thing I'll say too about this website, and actually, let me see if I have it down here. Yeah. So a little bit of 411, the info on how to give, right? So clicking through on this website, you can give through credit card, PayPal, Apple Pay, Venmo. I think there's a few other digital wallet options for people if they want to. So that's really handy for people to know, because that really exploded during the last drive too, when we let people know that it's not just credit cards. And there's various different things when you go through the donation process to cover fees for that for us, so that we don't have to pay the processing fee. The one thing to note is that, it's like all of these sites, they market themselves as free. None of them are totally free, because they throw a little tip on the end of a donation. So I'll just show you what I mean by that. So say, you know, we're going to give $25, right? We're going to walk through it right now. You know, DJ Lou, this is where people put their message, right? I love your shows. Keep continuing. So right here is where I get the option to how much I'm gonna, or excuse me, how I'm gonna pay, right? So credit card, Venmo, again, PayPal. Right here, there's a mail to check. So that's handy. This acts as a pledge, right? So back in the day, even places like NPR stations used to do pledges, right? Call up, write down the pledge. You know, there was like kind of this like logistics component to it. We have done away with that. COVID kind of did away with all of that. We don't do that anymore. The logistics alone kind of is a killer on that side of things, but people can come online and say, I want this to be a $25 check that I'm now going to put in the mail. I can pledge it. So I don't count that in our bank account as, you know, $25 until the check actually comes in. But publicly, it'll look like another 25 bucks have come in. And frankly, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I think 95% of people who pledged checks last drive actually sent the checks. So, you know, this is actually a pretty good return. People do actually still, you know, send the check, but that's one way. So you hit mail check and it opens up, you know, put your information in here kind of thing. It'll also ask you for that information if we do pay with a credit card here too. Now, what I was going to say up here. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Question before you get to the dollar amount there, like right now is showing $90. Does that update dynamically as it comes in, or do you have to keep that up to date?
No, that's all. Thank God we use the site. That's all updated. I can update that on my end. So say I go to the station and I pick up a bunch of checks from the mail and they haven't been pledged online, I manually will put those in and it'll, you know, boost up the overall thing. But for the most part, yeah, this is dynamic. So say we're making a $1 million donation from Savannah right now, that'll immediately blow our, you know, temperature gauge out of the water there. So when you're on the air, you don't have to get into specifics about this, but in case somebody calls or friends of yours who are going to have a question about this, I know a friend of Dave's had this question last time. So right here, you can see, here's my $25 donation. The next line here is covering the credit card processing fees, right? So we do want to have, if people are open to it, people cover that credit card processing fee so that we don't take that out of our, you know, bank account. You don't have to, though. You can hit edit and unclick cover the fees, right? So that takes it right off. And then finally, this is again that give butter thing where they pretend like they're free, but they're not really. They try to confuse people by putting a tip on this thing, by pretending like they're a processing fee. You do not have to pay the tip. So in other words, you do have to do the click down, click other, and it's $0 here. And that's all you need to do is put a $0 in and there's no tip. So in other words, you can see this total. It's kind of like cashing out a cart, right? Where you're looking at tax and shipping and, you know, the service fees and like the 17 other things that people put on stuff now. So for the most part, our donors, I'm actually pleasantly again surprised here. Most people figured this out, no problem. So they were just able to go through and be like, oh, wait a minute, what's this extra charge? They hit edit, they take the processing fee off. They don't want to do the tip, they take that off. And then they get down to here and they say, yep, there's just the $25 I want to give. I put my credit card information in. If I hit finish, it'd be done basically. And then my public post goes onto the website there. So yeah, again, handy information to know about that. Go ahead, Tom. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that as you were doing that, it already had included the tip. So it's kind of insidious especially if you're not super familiar with e-commerce.
Exactly. And you know, there was an over-under on this. I'll be totally transparent. Like we can turn that tip off, but then we have to pay for Give Butter. So they assign a whole percentage to the total amount of money that we raise. And so we kind of just like, we gave it a try last fall. And again, for the most part, that worked totally fine. I think there was one donor out of the 150 we had who contacted me after being like, what was this percentage that got added on the thing? And to their credit, when I pushed Give Butter on it, and I said, this donor did not intend that to happen, they refunded her. So, you know, it's actually in the grander scheme of things, you know, it's what I call kind of a tolerable corporate addition to the process that ultimately makes a pretty good user interface work for us and be really helpful for the campaign. So much of this, when we first started doing drives, I did all of this manually. So to be able to find a site like this that is able to incorporate it all, give people multiple giving options, it's super handy. And everything I just verbally said and clicked through to show you guys the visual experience is somewhat summarily, it's summed up down here, basically. So step one, make your donation, pick the amount, heads up about the difference between a processing fee and a tip. And so donors can also kind of read through this and get a heads up about that there. The final thing I'll say about kind of the drive big picture here is that there are FCC rules. Of course there are, about contests. And technically we're running a contest by giving away incentives to donors. So the contest is anyone who, the rules are, if you will, anyone who gives to the drive between March 16th or anytime before March 16th and March 31st is entered to win the prize. And so I literally just have my 6-year-old draw numbers out of a hat. And, you know, we get 7 winners for, you know, a combination of the tickets, the banners, that kind of stuff. And those people end up winning. Now, we have to state the contest rules according to the FCC down here that make it clear about how you can enter to win. So in other words, you have to make a donation of some sort. And internal policy for the station, this is not an FCC thing, but internally, no staff, programmers, or anyone else, you know, involved in the station internally is eligible to win. So while we do oftentimes have many of our internal people donate during drives, if I draw one of your names, unfortunately, you can't win. So that's just an important thing to know there. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing screen for that and see if there's any questions about big picture drive, the site, how to use it, incentives. Okay. The other thing I'll say about incentives is that you will hear some other shows do show incentives. So probably the best example of this is if you listen to Curse of the Golden Turnip, which is the Sunday morning call-in show with Alan and Steven. Alan is notorious for giving out like these really special beans or plants or baba ganoush. Like those are the kind of the categories that he does. He's kind of renowned for it. He's done it for like 30 years or something for every drive. People go bananas for this stuff. So the way that that works is that I leave it up to each programmer to manage it themselves and kind of keep track of it, because it quickly can become like an administrative, you know, nightmare on the back end of that. And other shows who have dabbled in it, like the Grassers, they've got a little kind of nursery up in Walden. They basically tracked like who gave, you know, a certain level amounts of money, right? And then they gave out a couple bushes that they grow there or something like that. So if you guys tonight or anyone listening has an idea for incentives during the show, I just asked to coordinate with me so that I know A, that it's happening, and B, that we're making sure again that it meets the FCC regulations of not like it's basically you can't do tit for tat. In other words, like somebody has to be meeting the requirement, which is to give during the drive, right? And then also the incentive that if you give during this exact show, right, that's the other way to enter that incentive mini contest, if you will. Then you're going to be able to get the thing. So that's how that kind of like shrinks down into individual show contests, if you will, for FCC rules versus the larger drive where everybody's eligible. You could do $1 million or $1. Everybody gets entered to win the prize. Does that make sense incentive wise? It's a little bit of a way to work the contest rules, but then it also allows individual shows to like, you know, bring their own talents or, you know, resources to the drive and encourage people to give specifically again during those shows. So that's just another way to do incentives. We haven't really grown that very much because again, we're pretty new with this whole new schedule and there's no pressure for shows to do that. But if you're curious, when you start hearing a few people do that, that's what they're doing and how they're doing it.
So are those folks who are doing that actually tracking the donation site during their show so they know who gave during their show?
No, so the way that
Not really
Alan
clear
does it,
about that.
yeah, the way that Alan does it is he actually has a volunteer who they give her phone number out with her permission, and donors are basically like mini pledging, calling her with the information. So saying, hey, you know, Cynthia, like I'm Lou and I really want these magic beans. I'm going to give $30. They literally drive checks to the studio. I mean, this is like some old school, like community drive, you know, jam here that's happening on Sundays. Again, it's a little bit different than how some other people do it, but that's how he's managing it. Alan and Steven are managing it. They've got a volunteer and it's great. They make it work. It's fine. He actually also leaves Baba Ganoush out for the donors outside the studio. So you'll see a little table out there where just don't touch it. No animals have, you know, eaten it yet. So I just kind of let it go. But the Grassers is a different example. So they gave me a heads up that they're going to give away a tree and a couple of bushes during their show. And then I was able to track, again, to your point, Tom, like live, you know, time-stamped who gave during that show and did they give it the amount that would qualify them to win that. And then I just fired them off the names, which is easy enough for me to do. Again, there isn't such an overload of incentives happening during shows that it's too much to manage. And if we ever got to that point, I would just have another volunteer help manage that. But that's the really nice thing about the Drive website again, too, is that I can go back and literally look at timestamps of, okay, Savannah gave the $50. She gets the, you know, the bush of, you know, the berry bush from the Grassers. And and then they take care of the rest, right? Then they kind of coordinate with the donor to come pick it up in the spring or whenever the berries will be ready or something. So. Okay, so that's the overall goals and why we do it. The Drive website, which again is going to be your best friend when you're live on the air. It's going to feel really exciting when someone gives. It's like a dopamine hit. Just be ready for that, because you're gonna be like, oh my God, someone's actually listening, and I actually convinced someone to give, and then it's gonna be game on. Like, listening to people have that experience on the air last year it kind of made me almost want to give, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure Dave had this feeling too, especially listening to some of the shows that just like the hype got high.
It was great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it's also frankly really validating, right? Like you're in there pouring your heart and soul into doing these shows, and this is a proof that people care and they really appreciate it. You know, where people put money into things that they care about. So I just want to remind you. Yeah.
And it was the new programmers who really were leading the way, and now you have the opportunity to do the same. In fact, the pressure's on you now to do the same thing and take the lead in this one, because they really did. And I mean, some of the things they came up with, ideas that they were cross-pollinating, or whatever the correct term is. It was great. I mean, and people had a good time, they had fun.
Yeah,
it was fun. It was a fun drive.
And that is a beautiful segue in the spirit of radio to the second piece I wanted to touch base about, which is how do you bring a little extra fun to your shows during the drive? So, there's again, no rules that you have to. Like, you can just do a regular old show and just add in a couple of pitches, and that would be totally fine. But this is an opportunity for you to dabble a little bit and do a little something different with your show. And I know you guys are brand new, so like everything feels like a new show to you. But, this is where people bring in ideas like doing a theme-based show, a special theme just for, the drive, or people bring in a special guest, right, who sits in the studio and co-hosts with them for that one show or something, or, people who are really overachievers bring in live music, or have certain people call in to to bring the show to a different level or do a different thing. There's 100 different ways to get creative about it, but especially for people listening back later, we've got two brand newbies. Like, I think you guys are both, 3-4 shows in at this point, maybe 5. So no pressure for the brand new rock stars on the air to do anything different than what you're doing, because you're doing great. But for example, for my show, I like to bring down my DJ gear. I used to DJ live before COVID, like at Higher Ground and other places. And it's like a great opportunity for me to dust it off, see if I still got it. And I just basically do a midday dance party live on the air. So different than my normal show, where I'm just kind of spinning new music and kind of a more traditional music show. And this one's like straight up like beat matching. I have a whole rig in there. Dave's seen me, like I'm, it's like a full on, thing midday there. So yeah, that's just some ideas about different ways to do what you do, but like level it up to another level, and just think about really, hey, what could I do? Just like experiment a little bit, be a little creative, have a little extra fun with it. And just like there's no risk in this. Like, anything you do is going to sound great to people, because there's this collective energy. And again, collective, something different is happening. I hear something different on the air at GDR and GDH right now. And it's because the drive, everybody's doing something a little, I don't know, just creative and something different. And people really hear the difference on that. So the other thing I'll mention is that Dave was alluding to this. So I put this under the category of pitching. So this is the heart of the matter. Okay, Lou, great. We understand we're doing a drive. Sure, I'll do something creative with my show, but how the heck do I ask people for money? Like, what is this pitching thing? So you all have listened to public radio, I'm sure. You've listened to other stations that do drives all the time. And there's a reason that not a lot of stations, I think, would argue that it's a fun drive, because the pitching is so damn boring. It's like, if you repeat that phone number one more time, VPR, I'm going to call and like just harass you. I'm going to ask you to give me money so that it's just like, it becomes like this monotonous, like almost like badgering people kind of feeling when people are just like ripping on a script nonstop, and just like, just kind of going through the motions. You can feel it, you can hear it. That's the thing about radio, is that you can't hide behind much. It's like, you can tell it in your voice if someone's not into what's happening. So we do have a script. There's like a standard script that's got everything you just saw. It's kind of, it's got the goals. It reminds people why community radio is important. There's a couple of blurbs at the bottom of the script below where the goals are that explain things like, we're always looking for listener feedback. Here's an understanding of our programming that's exploded in the last, year. There's some sub blurbs, so to speak. But really what I say to people is that a pitch is you just talking about why you do this. why you love the radio station, why community radio is different and unique and worth funding. You can get nerdy about it. If, and I'm always happy to nerd out with like spitting out facts and figures like, hey, did you know it costs $100,000 to run these 2 radio stations? And we're bare bones, y'all. Like we've got one, 32-hour-a-week station manager and everything else is volunteer run. Like this is a true like team effort by the community to keep this station on the air, and donors are the #1 part of it. The other stat that I think is really important, there's a little poster that's in the studio that says this too, is that over 80% of our budget is funded by individual donors. I was actually in a meeting with the Vermont Community Foundation this week. I was talking about kind of the potential that, well, if Goddard sells the campus, what would happen to us? Like, how would we move quick? And they were giving me some ideas, and they asked me about the budget and how it's percentage based. And I said, over 80% of it is donated by individual donors. A lot of those are from the drives, right? Mid to low range donations. And the person's jaw dropped. A professional fundraiser at the Vermont Community Foundation said, that is astounding. She hadn't heard any small, brand new nonprofit like us have that high of a threshold of individual donors. So these are bragging stats here. This is like important stuff that people should know and should feel proud about. And again, full circle here, right? The psychology of fundraising. People want to be part of that. They want to help be part of that. So again, if you want to nerd out, if you want facts and figures and stats, feel free to ask me. Feel free to ask any most board members. We have a couple new folks who might be like, I don't know, do we take donations? They're that brand new. So yeah, feel free to kind of craft your pitches with like a little bit of like, did you know kind of stuff. I also love telling origin stories. A lot of you, especially new folks, like you all have a reason why you wanted to come make a radio show. Tell people that story. Tell people the story of how you found GDR. I love those. I mean, like the number of times that I've been told, especially from our new folks, that like people moved to Vermont and the first thing they did was Google community radio and then WGDR popped up. I'm like, yes, that like we are a place where people come to find us and to kind of get plugged into the community. What better thing is there for that? So people will hear this, like just tell a story, remind people how to give. If you appreciate the station as much as I do, go to WGDR.org, lots of different ways to give there. And then you can do a little bit of the shtick there, right? Like you can give by credit card, check, blah, blah, blah. But, then get off it, go right back to your show, thank people very much. When you come back in, maybe a couple talk breaks later, go back and read the thank you feed, and say, hey, Tom, Dave, and Savannah, thank you each for giving $1 million to the radio station. Like it's really helpful. We're almost at our, $1 billion donate, drive. Here's the other thing I will also add, y'all, is that, and I almost didn't do this last drive, but it ended up being like something worth doing because we blew past our goal. We had a $10,000 goal and we hit it with 3 days left to go in the drive. And so there was this hemming and hawing of like, should we stop? Should we, we've never experienced this before. And it was like, no, we should not stop. We should keep going because the more we raise for the station, it all goes right to what we're doing. So I would love to have that problem again. No pressure, everybody, but but the goal is 15, and that's a significant amount of money to be raising on an average daily. And you'll see again, there's big boosts when we're live. You'll see it kind of jump up on the evenings. You'll see it jump on the weekends. And then don't get discouraged when you see it really not do anything middays, because there's a reason for that. We're syndicated during most of our midday workday hours and stuff. So I just encourage folks to keep that in mind. The other cool thing about pitching, so there's the you, right? There's what you're telling your stories, you're talking about stats, you're talking about what's cool about being part of the station, what your experience is thus far. But I love cross pitching. So cross talk with somebody else makes it so much more fun. So one hack of doing that, and sorry, the F-35s are flying over Burlington right now. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but can you hear it?
A little bit.
Well, I'll continue here. Yet reason number 500 when I'm still trying to move to Central Vermont is to get away from the F-35s. But to cross pitch, one hack of that is if you're lucky enough to have somebody before or after you, reach out to them and ask if they'll stick around for an extra 5 or 10 minutes to do a little crosstalk at the top of your show, end of their show. There were some really lovely, organic, like really fun radio, frankly, to listen to, especially when some of these shows that you would just never, you think that people have nothing in common. But again, what we have in common is our love of community radio, our love of doing the shows. And there's just this like natural riffing that can happen here. So, ask each other a question or two, Especially if you're doing it with somebody who's new going to a vet, or, you know, a vet going to a new person. That can also be a fun play thing where you're like, you know, like, so Alan LePage, you've been around for, you know, on the air since like what, 50 years, 30 years, like, you know, ask them a question about themselves, and it can really just, you know, provide a little bit of fun there. So Savannah, this is not for you, I know. But you know, Tom, you and Emma could like have a little fun, and you know, at the start of your show, and anybody else should really take advantage of that. And again, doesn't have to be for a long amount of time, but people love that interplay, because we also don't have a lot of shows that have co-hosts, you know, so hearing two voices on the air can be a lot of fun for that. We can also, yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say the thing that I've done. I won't be doing it for this tribe, but what I've done in the past is, you know, Jeff Lindholm is right after my show, so he'd come in for the last hour of my show, and then I stay for the first hour of his show, and so we kind of do that. We got 2 hours covered, and it doesn't burn anybody out. So
exactly. Yeah. Or again, bring your friends in to co-host, like have a little bit of, you know, fun where, you know, you're letting them pick the tunes, and, you know, you're running the board, and they just get to kind of like, you know, monkey around a little bit with you in the studio and have a little bit of fun about stuff. There's a billion different directions you can go with this, where it becomes again about doing something a little bit different show wise, again, infusing pitches and talking about the drive in ways that again, don't feel like a pitch, right? You're just happy to be mentioning thank yous, happy to be mentioning, hey, if you're into this drive, you can give. There's really, I try to stay away from the scripted stuff as much as possible, because it just doesn't sound as good. And then the final thing I'll say about, you know, overall pitching is that, I am happy to call into any show, including yours, Savannah. Again, my kid gets up at 5 a.m. So, you know, I'm up. I'm not necessarily always listening, because he controls the speakers in the house when he's awake. Let me just put it that way. Welcome to Parenting 101, is that I don't get to listen to my music, but I am happy to live call in. I know Dave would probably be happy to live call in. We have board and program committee and even fellow programmers. So if you would love, you know, the chance to just have, you know, somebody engage with your show, but you don't have somebody who follows you or precedes you, or you're just kind of like want to dabble with it a little bit. I don't know, Dave, am I a good time? Am I a good pitch buddy? You tell me.
Yeah, no, we've had a good time when we've done that.
Yeah, we have indeed. And again, it's just like, let it be organic. You know, you can do a little pregame of like, all right, you know, like, all right, Savannah, you and I, like, let's talk about XYZ, right? So you can kind of know a little bit what to expect. I will tell you, the phones are easier to use than maybe anybody ever huffs at you. Like, it really, if I can do it when I'm having an emotional like moment of holding space for Reuben Jackson, and get somebody on the air, you know, like, people can do it. It's a pretty easy, straightforward thing to do. Or we can also pre-tape. That's the other thing I'll add on there. We're kind of running out of time for that at this point, but you know, it could be as simple as a 5-minute, 10-minute Zoom. We record the audio for it. I send it, you know, to the programmer, and you just chop it out, and you take whatever piece you want, and you just play it. And you can even play it during a live show, which is another, you know, kind of use the smoke and mirrors of radio and make it seem like, you know, it's a live thing. So I'm going to pause there with pitching. Those are a couple, half a dozen or so ideas about how to make pitching not like our friends in public radio. But yeah, I'll see what questions folks who are here tonight have about pitching or anything else, really. This is the open it up big question part.
Well, I'm excited. I get to do 3 shows during the drive. So
Yeah.
Yeah. About every other show I've been doing a theme show, so I'll probably continue that. I was just thinking about people I could have on the air, so that could be fun. Yeah, I think there's a lot of fun possibilities with this, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely something you can grow into too, right? So I really want to emphasize that for people who are super brand new. It is totally fine to do what you've been doing and kind of take, you know, listen to everybody else, right? Like, see what other people are doing, and then like be like sparked for new ideas, because we do this again in the fall, right? Like, we get to do this twice a year, and Tom, it's by design actually that we do 3 weekends, because again, it's when we're the most local and live, and we can kind of cheat at 2 weeks in that way when we're doing it, and it really quite literally has paid off for us in that way. Yeah.
I also feel a certain amount of gratification in being on the other side of the mic for one of these, because like you're saying, they definitely get super annoying on public radio, on NPR. So yeah, we'll try to avoid that. At least definitely try to avoid that.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it comes through in the voice. Like, you know, even when I'm there by myself and I'm pitching, I center myself and I remind myself why I'm doing this. That like, I honestly feel like the coolest thing I do in my life is when I'm sitting in a studio doing a radio show. There's just something like about it. And if I wasn't able to do that, like, oh man, like my life would be less rich. My life would be less fun, you know? So I try to convey that of like just gratitude to people. And frankly, that's the other hack too. If you get nervous about pitching, the best pitch is thanking people, even people who don't end up ever giving. We would not exist if we didn't have listeners. And so this also ends up being an opportunity to just be really like gratitude forward on the microphone for people who give. And, you know, again, I'm always happy to spit out like a half a dozen stats or something if people want to know that. But collectively, just so that you guys know, we have over 3,000 people, individuals each month streaming the station. So that's just one stat to know. Like a lot of people listen to us online. And then I've never tested it because I don't know how I would do that, but the NPR affiliates many years ago came up with a fundraising based equation to help stations figure out how many people do listen on broadcast. Because unless you follow people around, how do you ever actually really know that? And so the equation that they used to do, and they still I think use, is that about the number of donors you have in the last 5 years, because not everybody gives year to year. That's the other thing that's frustrating. And the other great thing that's good about drives is that we're reminding people, hey, did you not get a chance to give last year? We're doing a drive right now. Go ahead and give this year. You'll see that as a goal in there as well this year, is that we're looking for people to kind of return to giving this year. That's kind of a low key way of saying, look, we know last year was a hard year. A lot of people couldn't give, but most people have righted those ships. And if you can, please do give now. But it's basically 10% of your listeners end up being donors. So if you look back in the last 5 years, that's like the rough number to use. And those folks end up giving donors. So in the last 5 years for CVCR/Goddard, because we're not even 5 yet, y'all, like we're a strong 2.5 is how I describe our age as a nonprofit, with like real growing pains. But we have about 900 donors in the last 5 years. So a combination between Goddard, under Goddard's ownership and ours. And so that equates to be about 9,000 listeners. So 9,000 plus 3,000, again, rough math here, because I'm sure we have broadcast and streaming kind of crossover there, but around 12,000 people listen to WGDR and WGDH in some sort of a way at some point in any given, month, week, whatever we're there. So that's a significant amount of people listening to our station, and a lot of people to thank. And again, a lot of donor potential out there. Because if you think about that trickling down, wow, if there's that many people listening and we only have about 125 to 150 people give during each drive, what our goal here is to motivate, right? You listen to the station a lot. We really appreciate that. It really does take every single one of us giving what they can give. And it truly adds up. You can literally see it happen during these drives on the website. And I'm never a believer. Like the first week, I'm like, we're going to be lucky if we hit 5,000. And then Dave and I make a friendly bet and I lose every single bet. So yeah.
When I was in California, I gave to KPFK and KPFA when I lived in those two places, and they sent me annoying postcards after that. So we don't follow up with people and bother them, do we?
We do not. We don't have the resources for it, and B, badgering people for gifts if they only give a certain level is not, I think, how you make friends and in any high place. Yeah. So
it made me not want to give ever again.
I know, right? It's easy to get annoyed. So no, what we do for follow-up is thanking. We send a thank you. They'll get it if they give online, they're gonna get a thank you anyway. That's gonna be an automatic email that says thanks so much and blah blah blah. Yeah. What we did at the fall drive, which I think we'll do again this time, is that we did a by hand mailing. So it allowed us to handwrite little thank you notes. It was a standard, thank you page that I printed out a stack of everybody who had given up until the point we did the mailing. People were writing thank you notes on there by hand. We were throwing a sticker in there and then sending it out. Besides that, people get signed up for our kind of regular station update email, but we're not slamming people on fundraising asks. We're not slamming people on anything in the mail. If anything, we do an end of the year appeal, but honestly, Tom, the only people who get that appeal are people who have yet to give that year. So in other words, like they have all year to give, and then I pull that list of who hasn't yet given this year that's on that list, and then they get that kind of standard end of the year appeal. So I think building friends comes more out of gratitude and laying off the hard asks. And it always ends up, you want people to give when they're ready, they're darn ready, you know, and when they feel motivated for it. And that's 100% why drives really work well for us, is that we only do it twice a year. I mean, there'll be lots of, I think, pressure and ideas that people are like, oh, we should look how successful that is. We should do it like 3 times a year, 4 times a year, but that starts to do that exact same thing. That's like being a postcard on the air. We don't want to do that either. So
Now, how often does VPR? Seems like they're more than twice a year, aren't they?
they do, I think, somewhere around 6, because they call them mini drives, which is a sneaky way of basically getting on the air a few more times instead of longer
I'm
drives that
not
you
advocating for
Yeah.
it. It just seems like they do them more, you know.
They do. And you know, the other thing that's interesting about how other stations approach this, just real quick, is that they also do leveraging. So they get like a major donor to kind of like, you know, do donor matching and some other like higher level fundraising kind of strategies like that. Again, we're a baby sized nonprofit at this point. We don't have any high friends in high places that can be like, I'm going to give $10,000 and match every donation up to $10,000. We're not at that. But that's part of why VPR does that too, Dave, is that, you know, they get these, you know, big donors who are able to kind of almost underwrite a mini drive and then do this donor matching to kind of, again, motivate giving. So one day we'll be able to kind of play in that way, and we might do something like that. But until then, we're going to stick to these drives. And again, birthday weekend, which is another example, I think, of what I would call as close to a mini drive as there is, where we're going to have a low key goal. And again, just remind people, hey, if you didn't give during the spring drive, it's our 51st birthday weekend. Again, we're doing some fun and wild things. You know, we'll just play the Beatles birthday song on repeat for, you know, 3 days straight. And anybody who, you know, wants to make it stop has to give $51, you know. I think that's a good pitch. I think that's the pitch. I think we just came up with it.
I think that's it.
I want to honor your guys' time tonight. Any other questions from anything we went over tonight, or anything else kind of drive adjacent? Cool. All right. I really appreciate you guys coming tonight. It's so much easier for me to kind of rumble through this stuff when I have people to talk to. I was telling Dave, I was like, I was going to plan to do it anyway, but just talk to myself. And it makes me, you know, I don't come up with nearly as many good jokes. So thank you guys for being here tonight, and for being part of the drive and the overall team as well. So.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Nice
All right.
to see
Thanks, guys. I'll see you all later.
Take care.
Bye.
See y'all. Bye.